Good morning, everyone. What a beautiful, sunny spring day. So much more beautiful than the last few days, which were kind of gray and miserable. I'm so happy to see everyone here this morning. We are the North Shore Unitarian community, and we gather here every Sunday morning to build our sense of community, to hold each other accountable to the tenets of this faith tradition, and to explore our beliefs together. We welcome all to this caring community, no matter who you love, no matter where you find inspiration, and no matter what stage of life you're in. Here we endeavor to live with greater depth, meaning, and purpose. We gather on Sunday mornings in this beautiful building, in this beautiful wood, on a beautiful part of the North Shore, on the unceded territories of the Coast Salish people. And it's our hope, with good intention, to build healthier relationships and a beautiful future for all those who live on this land, including our First Nations neighbors. Now, before we get into things, a little public service announcement. We welcome you to put your cell phones, into Sunday service mode. Yeah, there's a few of you reaching for it. It's happened a few times lately, and not that we mind, but there's always that embarrassing moment when a phone rings just as we're deep in thought. I have actually just set my phone to have a regular schedule of silence between 10:30 and 12 every Sunday morning. Oh my gosh, wonders of technology. So I share that with you. And a little fun to get us started. Pop quiz, who is this gent? Bach, okay, that was not hard for anyone. It is Johann Sebastian Bach, German composer, renowned for orchestral music. This portrait of Bach apparently was done in 1748, just 2 years before his death, and he's holding one of the many canon pieces that he wrote. So what does this have to do with anything this morning? Any thoughts? Well, one, Catherine played a beautiful piece by Bach as the prelude, absolutely. Thank you, Catherine, it was absolutely beautiful. And the other piece, you may or may not have noticed, on the way in, there's a new community feedback board. We can consider that like a temporary exhibit. And it asks different questions about things that we've done in the church this year. Do you like coffee before the services, etc.? We're looking to get feedback in a myriad of ways over the next few weeks, and this is one opportunity for it. And sitting at the bottom of that suggestion board, or that question board, is a suggestion box that's lovingly called Johann Suggestion Box. Dun, dun, dun. All right, that's not actually an original. It wasn't mine. It was Bruce who suggested it, and in fact, it's well known all over the internet, so we can't take credit for it. But you'll see there's some colored cards sitting in your pew, just in the seat pocket. Anyone who's sitting in the front row, you have to reach over the back to get one. And these are for feedback about the services. You can start with today's service, any feedback you like about the format, the space, the flavor, the music, any of that. We'd love feedback, and we'll do it over the next few weeks, just as another way of gathering feedback, right? Anything you like, and then give it to Johann, who will be just thirsty for feedback on your way out of the sanctuary. All right, serious puns aside, let's light the chalice to mark the start of our time together. From a tiny spark, the light of community can shine forth. Coming up here this morning to help with the candle lighting this morning is Joanna Vaughn. There she is. So Joanna, thank you for agreeing to light the candle. She's been a member here for a long time, along with her husband, Bob. And she's, in fact, a lifetime Unitarian Universalist. Those are rare beasts. Yes. She grew up in Montreal, where she attended a UU congregation there. And you've been a leader and a contributor to many, many parts of this congregation, including the lunch bunch, buildings and grounds, the welcoming team, and you've always been a member of the choir, which is much appreciated. Joanna, I want you to know that somebody said you have such a warm and friendly demeanor that practicing radical hospitality just seems to come natural to you. Yeah. So thank you, Joanna, for lighting the chalice today. We kindle this flame as a symbol of our gathering. May the light of understanding illuminate our darkness. May the warmth of sharing bring us peace. Ooh, little glitch there. Our little candle went out. Let's try that again. Do you want to just... This is magic. Always have a plan B. There. Do you want to light yours?
Oh. Okay.
Each Sunday this year, we're also lighting 2 other candles. One is for joys and concerns. This week, inside our own community, we're thinking of Elaine. She's not here this morning, but a brother of hers just died, and it's the second brother that's died in just 2 months. So that's weighing very heavily on Elaine this morning. We'll send her hugs as she's with her family. In the bigger picture, I think of the family of Brian Mulroney and an amazing funeral service yesterday. If you haven't seen pieces of it on the news, it's a beautiful, beautiful service. And I'm grateful for that. Any other thoughts from anyone? People weighing on their hearts? Mm-hmm.
My brother just died yesterday.
Oh, Julia.
He was 10 years younger.
Oh, Julia.
I'm sad.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Any others? And lastly, we'll light a candle for global concern. A tragedy in Moscow, more strikes in the Ukraine. The world is a mess. And today is Purim, which is the Jewish holiday that commemorates the saving of Jewish people from an annihilation in Persia years ago. I don't know how to put that in the world today. So for all of these, brothers, world tragedies, let's just pause and hold those thoughts represented by these candles in our hearts. Let's just have a brief moment of quiet reflection, or if the word fits, prayer or meditation. And with each other and all that which is larger than ourselves, let us call our attention to the ways and the woes of the world in this morning, in this moment, just for a moment. Thank you. Now let's rise as you are able and sing together a beautiful song by Jason Shelton, hymn 1014, Answering the Call of Love.
The promise of the Spirit, faith, hope, and love abide, and so every soul is blessed and made whole. The truth in our hearts is our guide. We are standing on the side of love, hands joined together as hearts beat as one, emboldened by faith. We dare to proclaim we are answering the call of love. Sometimes we build a barrier to keep love tightly bound, corrupted by fear, unwilling to hear, denying the beauty we found. We are answering the call of love, hands joined together as hearts beat as one, emboldened by faith. We dare to proclaim we are answering the call of love. A bright new day is dawning, when love will not divide. Reflections of grace in every embrace, fulfilling the vision divine. We are answering the call of love, hands joined together as hearts beat as one, emboldened by faith. We dare to proclaim we are answering
Powerful words. All right, as Unitarian Universalists, we enjoy a living tradition. It's not static, it's not based on one fixed text. Instead, we affirm the 8 principles, our moral guides. They represent our shared values. We draw inspiration from many sources: science, poetry, various world leaders, political, spiritual, and otherwise, people, life's experiences, and more. So this morning, we're drawing wisdom from 2 books written by Mitch Albom. Both have been bestsellers, although Tuesdays with Morrie is probably far better known in popular culture. Both books are true stories. Both have a central character who is dying. And through their conversations, we learn the wisdom of the dying. Morrie said, "Once you learn how to die, you learn how to live." So Tuesdays with Morrie tells the story of a relationship between Mitch and Professor Morrie Schwartz. It recounts the first part of their connection when Mitch was a university student in Morrie's classes years earlier, and then it chronicles 14 visits on Tuesday afternoons, Tuesdays with Morrie, very late in Morrie's life when he's dying of ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. In those visits, Morrie shares with Mitch his perspective on life. Now, Morrie readily admits that he borrowed freely from all religions. He was born Jewish, became agnostic when he was a teenager, partly because of all that had happened to him as a child. He enjoyed some of the philosophies of Buddhism and Christianity, and he still felt home culturally in Judaism. He was a self-described religious mutt. Fun. I actually think he might have been a secret Unitarian Universalist, but Certainly his wisdom seemed to transcend all religious differences. He said, getting close to death has a way of doing that. It's a beautiful book. It's less than 200 pages, full of humor, humility, and heartfelt stories. I think it should be compulsory reading for all of us at each stage of life. No less relevant today than when it was first published in 1997. As Morrie was dying, Mitch actually approached a publisher with the idea of the book with the explicit intention of using the proceeds to pay for Morrie's medical bills. Initially rejected by several publishers, we've heard that story before, it was finally accepted, and the book exceeded all expectations. It's still one of the top-selling memoirs of all time. More than 20 million copies have been sold. It's been translated into 40 languages, and there was an Emmy Award-winning television film starring Jack Lemmon made out of it, and on it goes. It promoted Mitch Albom into stardom as a nonfiction writer that he had not anticipated, and it nudged him onto a renewed journey of faith. A decade later, in 2009, having released several books, Mitch published a second nonfiction book called Have a Little Faith. Now, this book is quite different. It focuses on the story of 2 men, Albert Lewis and Henry Covington, one a rabbi, one a reverend. 2 very different people whose lives and stories taught Mitch to believe in something bigger than himself, and more importantly, taught him how to believe. The story spans 8 years, and it explores the us versus them that divides faith all around the world. And interestingly, the word faith is almost never used in the book by either character. But the lessons that are shared convey a deep sense of faith. 10% of that book's earnings are used to support homeless shelters and other charities. So this morning, relevant to that story, I'm going to focus on the wisdom of Rabbi Albert Lewis. He's known as Al, or the Reb. Reb is an affectionate term that gets used for the rabbi in a community. I won't share the story of Reverend Henry Covington. No spoiler alert is needed. Have a Little Faith is a book that is worth reading, and you'll discover for yourself the amazing, inspiring, true story of Henry Covington, and that story could be a service all of its own. In the early chapters of Have a Little Faith, Mitch describes how he grew up embedded in religious tradition. As a child, he went to synagogue every Saturday, and he attended religious school 3 times a week. By age 13, he had learned to chant from the Torah, and he was a regular reader at Saturday services. He had a bar mitzvah, he went to a Jewish high school, and then he attended Brandeis University, which had a largely Jewish population. During university, he helped pay for tuition by working with the youth group at a temple just outside of Boston. So he graduated university as well-educated and life-immersed in a religion as anyone could be. And then he walked away from all of it. It's not an uncommon story. Maybe you have a similar story. Mitch says it wasn't a revolt. There was no tragic story that resulted in a loss of faith. It just dwindled away. It was apathy. Work and life got busy, and he felt he didn't need religious ritual or faith. And over time, as an adult, he developed a cynical edge towards religion. Like so many of us, he experienced the pious hypocrisy of religion everywhere in the world. You know, the congressmen who leave the apartment with the mistress to go to a church service. Or like a football coach lying or breaking the rules and then kneeling for a team prayer. And he says there was always this sense, as a Jewish person, that you should bite your tongue, this nervous energy that somebody out there doesn't like you. I mean, indeed, anti-Semitism is very real, along with many other anti-things in the world today. In his late 30s, he was a famous sports journalist and speaker, also a very talented musician. And one day in the year 2000, just a couple years after the fame of Tuesdays with Morrie, a man stood waiting for him after a speech, a man whose face he had never forgotten. Albert Lewis, his childhood rabbi, greeted him and asked Mitch if he would give a eulogy for him when he died. Mitch reluctantly agreed, with the condition that they spend some time together so that he could get to know him again. And so, like Tuesdays with Morrie, a series of visits happened where Mitch learned about his life, Al's work, his family, his faith. At that point, Al was 82, and he had worked in the same synagogue for 50 years. And so the stories he had about the people, the events in their lives, how he'd worked with them, walked with them, mourned with them, mentored them, learned from them. Interspersed in both books are many stories, and they read like parables. Al and Morrie are very clear in their answer to the question, how do you find a meaningful life? Morrie said, devote yourself to loving others, devote yourself to the community around you, and devote yourself to creating something that gives you purpose and meaning. Yeah, you go. With a cheeky grin, Morrie would add, you'll notice there's nothing about salary in there. Al said very similarly, invest in the human family, invest in people, build a little community of those you love and who love you. Be compassionate and take responsibility for one another. If we could learn those lessons, the world would be so much better a place. And Al and Morrie both spoke repeatedly about love. The most important thing in life is to learn how to give out love and to take love in. Let love in. We think somehow quietly that we don't deserve love. If we let it in, we'll be soft. But a wise man named Levine said it right. Love is the only rational act. Love is the only rational act. Morrie described life as having a tension of opposites, a series of pulls back and forth. You want to do one thing, but you're bound to do something else. Something hurts you, even though you know it shouldn't. You take some things for granted, even though you should never take anything for granted. It's a tension of opposites, like a pull on a rubber band. And most of us live somewhere in the middle. To that analogy, Mitch responded, that sounds like a wrestling match. A wrestling match, Morrie laughed. Yes, I guess you could describe life that way. So which side wins? Mitch asked. Which side wins? Said Morrie, with the crinkled eyes and his crooked teeth. Love wins, Morrie. Love always wins.
When I was a girl each week, Sundays we would go to church, pay attention to the priest. He would read the holy word, consecrate the holy bread, and everyone would kneel and bow. Today the only difference is everything is holy now. Everything everything is holy now. When I was in Sunday school, we would learn about the time Moses split the sea in two, Jesus made the water wine. And I remember feeling sad that miracles don't happen still. But now I can't keep track, 'cause everything's a miracle. Everything's a miracle. Wine from water is not so small, but an even better magic trick. Is it anything is here at all? So the challenging thing becomes not to look for miracles, but finding where there isn't one. When holy water was rare at best, it barely wet my fingertips. Now I have to hold my breath, 'cause I'm swimming in the sea of it. It used to be a world half there, heaven's second-rate hand-me-downs, but I walk it with a reverent air, 'cause everything is holy now. Everything is holy now. Read a questioning child's face, say it's not a testament. That'd be very hard to say. See, another new morning comes, say it's not a sacrament. I tell you that it can't be done. This morning outside I stood, I saw a little red-winged bird shining like a burning bush, singing like a scripture verse. It made me want to bow my head. I remember when church let out, how things have changed since then. For everything is holy now. It used to be a world half there, heaven's second-rate hand-me-down, but I walk it with a reverent air, 'cause everything is holy now.
Beautiful. So Morrie and Al are both dying. Death is what everyone worries about, isn't it? What if today were my last day on earth? The culture doesn't encourage us to think much about such things until we're about to die. We're so wrapped up in egotistical things, career, family, paying the mortgage, earning money, getting a new car, fixing the boiler when it breaks. We're all involved in a trillion little acts that just keep going. So we don't get into the habit of standing back and looking at our life and saying, is this all? Is this all I want? Is something missing? Morrie said we all need someone in our lives to ask us those questions, to probe us in that direction. We all need those teachers in our lives. To know you're going to die and to be prepared for it at any time, that's a better way to live. That way you can actually be more involved in your life while you're living. Mitch asked Al, but how can you ever be prepared to die? And Al said, well, do what the Buddhists do every day. Have a little bird on your shoulder that asks, is today the day? Am I ready? Am I doing all that I need to do? Am I being the person I want to be? Morrie said it's hard for us to think about dying because we all walk around like we're sleepwalking. We really don't experience the world fully. We just walk around doing the things that we automatically think we need to do. And facing death changes all that. because you strip away all the stuff and you focus on the essentials. When you realize you're going to die, you see everything much differently. So many people use that expression, well, you can't take it with you. And Morrie speaks to this about materialism. People are brainwashed into believing that more is better. More money is good, more property, more commercialism. That message has been repeated to us over and over so much that many people don't even bother to think otherwise. People are actually so hungry for love, but they seek and accept substitutes. They embrace material things and expect like a hug back. And of course that never works. You can't substitute material things for love or gentleness or tenderness or a sense of comradeship. Satisfaction in life comes from offering others what you have to give. Do the things that come from the heart. When you do, you won't be dissatisfied. You won't be envious. You won't long for somebody else's things. On the contrary, you'll be overwhelmed with what comes back. In another part, Morrie says, dying is one thing to be sad over. Living unhappily is quite something else. And so many people live unhappily. I may be dying, Morrie said, but I'm surrounded by caring, loving souls. How many people can say that? At one point, Morrie leans into Mitch, and he says, Mitch, can I tell you something? Well, of course, says Mitch. You might not like it, says Morrie. Well, why not, says Mitch. Well, the truth is, says Morrie, if you really listen to that bird on your shoulder, if you accept that you can die at any time, you might not be as ambitious as you are. The things you spend time on, all the work you do, it might not seem so important. You have to make room for some spiritual things. Yeah, you hate that word, don't you, Mitch? Spiritual, you think it's touchy-feely. Apparently at that point, Morrie tried to wink, but he couldn't, and they both laughed. Morrie said, Mitch, I don't even know what spiritual development really means, but I do know that we're deficient in some way. We're too involved in materialistic things, and they don't satisfy us. The loving relationships we have and the universe around us, we take these things for granted. You see the window with the sun streaming in? He says, Mitch, you can go out there anytime. You're healthy, you can run up and down the block and go crazy. I can't do those things, not now. I can't run, I can't be out for fear of getting sick. But you know what? I appreciate that window way more than you do. I look out that window every single day. I notice the change in the trees, how strong the wind is blowing. It's as if I can actually see time passing through that window pane. I know my time is almost done, and yet I'm drawn to nature like I'm seeing it for the first time. And back to the subject of love. Love is how you stay alive after you die. As long as we can love each other and remember the feeling of love, then we can die without really ever going away. All the love you created is still there. The memories are still there. You live on in the hearts of everyone you've touched and nurtured while you were here. Death ends life. It doesn't end a relationship. Every day, have a little bird on your shoulder that asks, am I ready? Am I doing all that I need to do? Am I being the person I want to be? Please rise as you're able and let us sing together. Our heart is in a holy place.
We are blessed with love and amazing grace.
blessed with love and amazing grace. All right, let's pause and just talk for a moment about faith, because faith is a huge underlying thread in these two books, although, as I said, the word is rarely said. Hans and I had a helpful conversation last week. He told me in no uncertain words that he dislikes the word faith. I think you would say it's a wounded word for you. It has too many negative connotations and associations, and Hans prefers the word inspiration. And I really respect that perspective. And I want to say to you, Hans, I really thank you for that conversation, because the thoughts that I had this week wouldn't have been the same had we not. So I'm grateful for that. It prompted me to dig into the word faith. I honestly think I hadn't really ever thought about it much before. So by pure dictionary definition, the word faith means complete trust or confidence in somebody or something. That's pretty clear. But really, if you do any kind of internet search, ask Mrs. Google, there is much that comes up that associates faith with Christianity. Well, of course, that's natural. We live in the Western world, and we have to acknowledge how much of our current culture, our language, our perception, our lens has been shaped by a Christian culture. And indeed, Unitarian Universalism has strong Christian heritage. But our UU tradition calls us to question all that we think, know, and believe. And that applies to our understanding of faith. So I kept digging. Maybe we need to go further back. And I found myself learning about some of its origins, like way back with the Protestant Reformation. That's like 500 years ago. True faith was said to have 3 components, Latin names. It had notitia, assensus, and fiducia. So the first component is notitia. I didn't ever take language, so I don't really know if I'm speaking Latin right, but anyway. So notitia is specific knowledge. It's Latin for knowing. It refers to the content of faith, the specific truths that we actually assert and believe. So we need to know some things to have true faith. But it's not enough to just know things. You actually have to then accept them as valid and true, and that's assensus, or agreement. Faith is more than simply having knowledge about something. It needs to include agreement with the knowledge. I mean, we live in a world that is full of claims of truth. Just because you've learned about the conspiracy theory doesn't mean you agree with it. So you need to have notitia, knowledge, and then you need to have agreement. The third component is fiducia, which refers to a trust or a confidence or a reliance. And it goes beyond agreement to the point of commitment. So when you're so confident in your assensus, you're kind of agreeing that you're willing to commit yourself, come what may. To me, fiducia also says something about the heart. Notitia and assensus, those are the knowing, agreeing parts. They're kind of from our head. But fiducia, that reminds us that faith also needs to come from our heart. So from long ago, there are these 3 core components that make up true faith. How do we apply that to Unitarian Universalism? Well, I think it does. Notitia, the knowledge or content of Unitarian Universalism, that relates to our principles and recognizes our sources. They're grounded in the values of kindness, love, interdependence, justice, equity. Assensus asks me if I agree with the principles, and fiducia refers to my wholehearted commitment to these principles. So I think we can authentically say there is faith in our UU tradition. I know the principles, I agree with them, their value, and I commit to living with them to the best of my abilities. I can have that faith. I can't leave the concept of faith without adding a very different perspective from Anne Lamott, who has many books, but in her book, Plan B, Further Thoughts on Faith, she writes, "The opposite of faith is not doubt, but certainty." Certainty misses the point completely. Faith includes noticing the mess, the emptiness, the discomfort, and letting it just be there until some light returns. And I think the stories and insights offered to us in these 2 books, Tuesdays with Morrie and Have a Little Faith, are ways to ground our faith. Devote yourself to loving others, build a little community of those you love and who love you, and devote yourself to creating something that gives you purpose and meaning. Be compassionate and take responsibility for one another. And lastly, Al said, faith is about doing. You are how you act, not just what you believe. And as Unitarian Universalists, I wonder that we don't need faith to live, but instead we live to find our faith. and our faith encourages us to continue to grow and evolve. In the last few weeks, reading and reflecting about the wisdoms from Alan Morrie, my mind's eye turned to our dear friend Nancy, who passed away in December. I've often wondered what Nancy's thoughts were in her last days. And Carrie and Liz, who walked along Nancy in the last part of her life every day, have kindly agreed to come and share some thoughts about faith and life and death, all centered on the question, what would Nancy tell us? Thank you, Carrie and Liz.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks very much, Rebecca, for asking Carrie and me to reflect at this stage about what Nancy might say based on Mitch Albom's Tuesdays with Morrie and a little bit of faith. It certainly seems that we have some similar experiences in our conversations with Nancy McMaster. There she is. For those of you who don't know Nancy, she was a long-time, very involved member of our church here who was diagnosed with terminal cancer last July and was committed to sharing her learnings and her process right up to the very last moments of her life, if possible. She died in mid-December, and her memorial celebration of life was here in February. In my several conversations with Nancy on this topic of end of life over her last few months, Nancy always expressed the feeling that it's over when it's over. Liz, it's over when it's over. That she would die with her last breath and her life would continue in however she had connected with others and how they carried her essence forward. And in discussions, and observing in the time when she was in the hospice, we both noticed how much easier it seemed for those who had a Christian faith. They were going home, called to a better place. Or even our friend Maurice Gibbons, Leslie Gibbons' husband, in the last weeks of his life, connected to this sense of creativity and gained this excitement about the transition, moving in towards a creative space in the last days. However, Nancy wondered and was always open to new, changing experiences. And she had many in her last weeks with us. And particularly in her last weeks, she experienced images of meeting with beings from different legal structures and different dimensions, shapes and colors. And Carrie and I were all ears as we were sitting beside her as she was going through these various experiences of her images. She felt ebullient. I had to look that word up. She said she was filled with joyful energy. This is in hospice. Now, as she said over and over again, she was so grateful that the medications kept her out of pain pretty much throughout, and that was truly a gift. She was filled with light over and over again in her experiences, with no boundaries to her body or to her psyche. She said, I'm sheer awareness, over and over. Do you want to share that?
Sure.
Carrie will tell the story of what happened with this.
So in preparing for one of the services where we were going to either have Nancy or hear a recording of her, I made a recording of her about 8 minutes long and then put it into GarageBand, and this peculiar event occurred in which the 1.2 seconds of this 8-minute section got looped. And it sounds like this.
My being, sheer awareness. My being, sheer awareness. My being, sheer awareness. My being, sheer awareness.
To say that it was creepy is beyond that. To hear her voice repeating that statement over and over, And for my relationship with Nancy was largely nonverbal. When you're in the music space, there is this reality that has no words, and yet it is completely real. It's three-dimensional, but only while the music lasts. And so I was very surprised when Nancy said, when the end comes, that's it. Because with music, and as Maurice had said a couple of years before, that creative place is a real place that you can go to that has a lot of perfection and so forth. And I think what Liz is going to say is that Nancy found that place in music within herself, and at the end of her life, she was wondering whether it really was the bitter end that some people feel.
So these days, I so often wish I could just text or pick up the phone and say, Nance, what happened? What's going on? Fill us in some more. And maybe that's for us to find out. Obviously, it's maybe meant to be part of the big mystery of being human, living and dying. And we die alone. It's our job to do, each one of us. It's an individual journey. So what Nancy really developed in her last months was her faith. Sorry, Hans, she used that word too. In life, at this very moment in time that she had. And as Nancy shared in September when she spoke with us here, her experience it was a transformational experience of being in the hospice at St. Paul's Hospital last July that led to an 180-degree turn in her life. In the past, she'd always, as Carrie said, had a deep connection to music and the power of music. But otherwise, not so much. She had struggles with trust of feeling loved, feeling worthy, feeling enough. And that would show up in relationships. Trusting relationships would be difficult for her. And then last July, this diagnosis, and she was filled with knowing that she was loved and loving. And there was tons of love available, enough to go around. Always, no need to earn it over and over. It just is. And like Morrie, she was convinced then, out of her own experience, at the core, that love was at the core of things and connected to those who we love. And she strengthened this purpose, this sense of purpose for her life, of being of service. She developed a faith in the flow of life, of her life, learnings available because she was facing death. Her life was about love, meaning, and beauty. And when she was in the hospice, she arranged for a party to share and give. Apparently, she had about 1,000 scarves in her little townhouse. And she brought all of them, or friends, many brought these scarves into the hospice in the day room. She stayed in her bedroom, and they connected by Zoom, and everybody came in and chose scarves and earrings, and this was her sharing. And she chatted via Zoom with everybody who was there for a few moments, wanted to chat with her. Apparently there was a lineup of people to chat with Nancy. And if you're interested, there will be some of Nancy's scarves on our April 13th clothing swap here. So her life was about love and meaning and beauty, as I've said. A story about some of the changes that she went through in the last weeks. She had a dear family member who she hadn't seen for a long, long time, who was due to come to visit her to say goodbye, living in the Okanagan and moving to Calgary. And this person got sick and couldn't come, and she was so upset. And like Morrie, I witnessed her feel the deep grief of having to let go of seeing this person again, who she cared deeply about. Went through it, took a couple of deep breaths and said, well, I guess that's one of the other things I have to learn to let go of, and that I won't see this person again. And that has to be okay. And she let go of that. And the story is that what came out of it was an intense texting relationship like never before between these two people that came out of that. So like Morrie, what she was saying is this letting go, part of the task of letting go, and that allows for having the faith of what is going to fill in the space of whatever we let go of. She was so moved and grateful. Increasingly, she was living an extraordinary, rich life. And as with Morrie, she was looking at life from a very different place to most of us, like a mystical, sorry, this is a quote from the book, like a mystical clarity of thought when looking death in the eye. With wisdom, gifts of awareness, filled with deeply meaningful, rich communications and acceptance, and sometimes black humor. Carrie and I were in the hospice with her in the early days. She was there for about 5 weeks, so the early week, meeting with the hospice doctor, negotiating about medications, because she'd been a bit groggy and she didn't like that. And she was negotiating, and the doctor was leaving the room, and she looked at, I was kind of in her eye contact. She looked at me and went, and then she said to him as he was walking out the door, well, I hope this works, otherwise I might have to hang myself. And the doc said, well, we won't let any string or cord get anywhere near you. Hilarious laughter. For me, what have I learned? It just feels very early in the process, just beginning. And I'm so grateful for this friendship with Nancy and for the very special times of the last months. My history as an only child of parents who wanted 6 kids, the result of my history is I've always assumed, somewhat like Nancy, of never being quite enough, highly responsible, often too busy, trying to temper that, and also with a similar purpose of feeling I'm here to be of service, and balancing that by clarifying more and more about my time of what's left for me. Letting go of fussing over what doesn't align with me. What would Nancy say to me is to say, have faith that you're worthwhile and enough, period. No conditions on that. And of course, a couple of months ago, I turned 80, and whoa, that's a kicker. Space enough now is important to emerge to what? In fact, I'm working now to be more focused with the rest of my life, to make more space and time for what matters most to me. And I think of our church and what Nancy might offer if we think about what might Nancy say from that place of the wisdom in those last weeks, as we move forward from our time of some enormous internal conflict here. In fact, I do feel that we went through a symbolic death and rebirth in our community here, and we're working our way from that and to the next, what's opening from there. Faith in our future, our church life purpose of depth, meaning, and purpose, and what opens to the new purpose as we have the opportunity to re-examine what would Nancy say, both individually and in planning for our church's life going forward. I would imagine her saying, to align with our values and our blessed principles of respect and interconnectedness, and to hold each other with compassion and humility and caring, and not to sweat too much about the small stuff. Is there anything more you want to say?
Our lives are millions of moments, and a few moments are absolutely enormous, and it is the presence of death, the very end, that makes some moments incredible. And I think what Nancy showed me was that you can have that intense moment if you realize that time is short and you have to be present now. And I think that's why we're really here. Half of what we perceive is nonverbal, not to do with words, not a Unitarian comfortable space. But I think this community, if we just have a moment without words, is everything.
Thanks.
So beautiful. Thank you. Morrie would say, giving is living. So to that end, we'll now take up the offering. This is a community outreach endeavor where each month we collect money and we give 100% to the outreach recipient organization. This month, it's Hollyburn Outreach Services, who support youth with emergency services, transitional housing, employment, work experience, life and social skill development. Please give as generously as you're able, and place your donation in a white envelope with your name on it so you can be offered a tax receipt. Will the ushers please take the offering? And as the offering is being collected, will you please rise and sing, "What a Wonderful World"?
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue and clouds of white, bright blessed day, the dark sacred night, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbows, pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people going by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're really saying, I love you. I hear babies cry. I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I ever know. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Yes, I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
For these gifts, and for all that we do for the community, both inside these walls and beyond, we give thanks. Please be seated. There are several announcements for today. First, can you smell it? Yeah, come downstairs for soup after the service. Suggested donation of $5, but all are welcome to come and enjoy. They're not leaving because they dislike what I've said. There's actually a reason they're leaving. It's all good. There is a little secret something planned, which might have to do with why they're leaving. So if you're not interested in soup, you should still come downstairs for coffee or tea, because there's a little special something planned down there. Huge thanks to Diane and Elizabeth and Yasha who provided the soups today. If you're new here, please come and say hello at the white tablecloth downstairs at the welcome table. And on your way through the narthex, that's the entry area, we'd love you to contribute to the feedback board, vote with a thumbtack, share your thoughts on an orange card, and give it to the Thirsty Johann suggestion box. Next week, join us with a music-filled celebration of emergence and transformation ideas that are at the heart of the Easter story and, in fact, many other religious and secular spring holidays. When the earth starts to warm, new growth begins, there's just something in the air that's uplifting and transformative. And there'll be 2 guest choirs that will add to the joy and splendor of the day. A reminder about the upcoming clothing swap on April 13th. 2 pieces to that. 1, go through your cupboards and bring in your donations. And 2, show up on the day. This dress and this scarf I got from the clothing swap. So just showing it off there. And Allison wanted to say a reminder. She did this beautiful backdrop a number of years ago, and she's going to do another one this week. So anyone on Thursday who wants to paint, and by her words, all you have to do is be able to paint your kitchen wall. She says it's paint by numbers, and she's looking for folks to come and help paint. So reach out and be in touch with Allison if you're interested in contributing. There's a few other events happening, so check out your e-bulletin and the announcements on the wall as you go downstairs. And now, let us close our time together. We extinguish this flame, but carry with us the light of vision and the warmth of hope. The world calls us to live with depth, meaning, and purpose. We go forth with courage and love. Would you all please stand as you're able, just for these last few words together. And if you're willing, take hands with someone, the person beside you, and you're welcome to close your eyes as we share in some final words together. Our minds often fail us when we ponder the enormity, diversity, complexity, wonder, despair, and beauty of the universe and this world. Each of us, every one of us, just gets one life, and we know not how long that will be. We sense more than we know that our lives are part of a larger life, that we're connected with everyone and everything in an interdependent web of being. There's something immanent and transcendent that nurtures and sustains our lives and life itself. So as we leave the sanctuary this morning, may we hear the call to an ever-widening perspective and deeper resolve to live with greater compassion and care for ourselves and others and the world, to touch others more deeply and see each other's joys and sorrows as our own, to strive to be and to become more than we are, more loving, more giving, more kind, more connected. May we face the uncertainties and tragedies of both life and death with hope, faith, courage, and love. The joy of living is still available to us, and remember, you're not alone. Amen, shalom, and blessed be. Let's sing Circle Round.